Hello and welcome to everyone to our webinar today as part of our series Straight from the Horse's Mouth, Insights from Experts in 30 Minutes. My name is Barbara and I'm your host for the next half an hour. Today we focus on EPDs, how to get started and how to get most value out of them. And it's my pleasure to have our guest speaker today, Rob Jonson. He's Customer and Market Relationship Manager at OneSteel's. Rob will share his story on how he guided OneSteel's to developing 5 EPDs, and that will include challenges as well as highlights and the feedback that they've got. You probably all know OneSteel's. They're just one of the biggest players in the steel sector in Australia. One of the reasons that companies like OneSteel's, Dulux, Arcelio Care or BlueScope are developing EPDs is they want to be ahead of the competitors. And that's not only in being the first of having an EPD, it is being ahead in sales opportunities, getting onto the preferred supplier list of specifiers, being ahead in marketing, but also in rankings like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, for example. They award higher scores if you have done an LCA or an EPD for your products. So there is a key business value for it. Why are other companies not doing it? What's stopping them? And when we ask them, what is the hardest part of an EPD and what is stopping you? The answer is most of the time it's getting it off the ground. It's most often not about getting sign-off or getting internal approval, but it's more the fear of this daunting task of a project that looks to be bigger than Ben-Hur, and being worried that the data is not available. Well, I can assure you the data is always there. And today we'll talk a little bit about how to find the right people who have this data. Breaking it into smaller steps is also helping to really bring it down to manageable small tasks, and also to divide those across a number of people, because as we'll later see, it's a team effort. What also helps a lot of people that we've talked to is that they just talk to others who have done it. There are about 3,500 EPDs published internationally. That means someone in your supply chain has done it. There are also about close to 40 EPDs in Australia or New Zealand. That's also why I'm particularly glad that Rob is joining us today to really talk from a business and an experience point of view, from a manufacturer's point of view. What I can promise you is an EPD is easier than producing your product, because we're simply telling the environmental story of the product that you are already producing. You know about your products, where the processes go to, what unit process follows what materials go into each of the processes, what are the energies flows going in. And it's a team effort. There are people in your company who do know all about this data. Finance will hold a lot of the data because they will know how much of what you've purchased. Product development will know what are all the bits and pieces going into specific products. The engineers will know where do one product flow into the next one. And while it sounds like a huge project and many people to get coordinated, if you start with a good planning meeting where you have them all around the table, that helps a lot with the whole process. And interestingly, what we heard as feedback is that even this initial planning meeting, where you get people from marketing, compliance, product development, finance around the table, it's already a valuable outcome for most of our clients, because not very often otherwise do people from marketing talk to the engineers or to finance. It is sort of an additional benefit coming out of this process of doing the EPD. And while not everyone on this list here might hold any of the data, it is still important to have them involved right at the beginning, because marketing, for example, will have to tell the story at the end. And part of the story is also the development process of the EPD. The next one really is to start collecting data. And again, this might look like a daunting task, but breaking it down into smaller bits is that we really only need all the inputs into a specific process, and we'll do that one by one. And the inputs would be a material, it is energy, a co-product coming out. So we're also looking at the outputs. There is waste, there will be some emissions. That's what the environmental guys on your side will know about. And basically putting this together for process after process will give us the full picture. We really need to ask those 4 questions. What is it? How much of it? Where does it come from? And where does it go to? If we can answer all those 4 questions, then we're nearly done. The question that remains is, in how much detail do we have to go? Do we have to do that also for the capital equipment, for the manufacturing of the goods that we need to produce our materials? And the lucky answer is no, we don't have to. And who's telling us that? That is where the product category rules come in. So product category rules are issued by the EPD program. And the product category rules help to ensure that all EPDs of all products include the same level of detail. So they would, for example, for an EPD for beer, they would say, yes, you have to include the growing of hops, but no, you don't have to include the copper, where you actually do the brewing. And that is to ensure that an EPD of every beer would follow the exact same rules and is comparable at the end. An example of a PCR for the construction sector is this one up here. And that would go into detail where it tells you for raw material supply, transport, manufacturing, this would be mandatory, that has to be included. Transport to the construction site is optional, and that is simply because that will be different for project by project. That's the level of detail that the PCRs provide you in terms of guidance. At the last webinar that we did with Lend-Lease, I had a question from the audience as in, well, but maybe there isn't a PCR for our product. What do we do then? So I had a look at how many PCRs are there, and there are already over 200 PCRs available covering all sorts of products. That includes metal products, it includes textile products, basic ores and minerals, furniture and other goods. So whatever your industry is, there most likely is already a PCR available. If there isn't a PCR available, it's a very transparent process of producing one. So all these PCRs have been done in an open consultation process. So the process gets initiated, but then all stakeholders who might have a view on the PCR are invited to comment. So for example, one computer manufacturer starts the process of doing an EPD and a PCR, then other manufacturers are invited and associations are invited to comment. It's also available on the website, so it really is not the case of just one group developing it, but it is an inclusive process. Once we've now collected all the data, the next bit is to work out what are the environmental impacts. And that is where we can help. We can do the number crunching for you to work out what is the global warming potential, what is the energy use, what is the resource use. Some clients of us do that in-house. They've built up the expertise and we just provide a little bit of guidance. That is really dependent on how many EPDs you're planning to do and how much expertise you have in-house. Now, turning this into the EPD, that is where marketing come in and turn it into a nice and readable document. Got a few examples here for you. This is a formatted EPD for toilet paper, and yes, it does have to have the details in here because that will enable the comparison. And some people might want to compare on the basis of the carbon footprint. Others might want to compare on the basis of renewable energy. That is why the data needs to be in there. The data also needs to be in there for the likes of Lend-Lease, who would rely on EPDs to calculate, for example, an LCA of a full building. In the EPD, you can also tell the story of your company, include some of the other sustainability highlights, and you can turn the results into a nice infographic. In a nutshell, the steps of going through the EPD and developing one is choosing the PCR, creating the LTA, going through a verification process, and then to register the EPD. And as we've seen, for all of those steps, there is a lot of guidance available, and we can help through that process. Now the outputs. There is not a single EPD or LCA project that we've worked on where we haven't identified some savings potential. Here is one example of we have lighting who dramatically reduced waste and cost by going through the process. Let's do a quick summary. One of the tricks to get a project off the ground is to talk to your peers who have done it before. There is nothing like first-hand experience to help you organize your own project. Organizing a kickoff meeting with all involved stakeholders within your organization is also a key element. That should include everyone who holds any of the data, but also marketing who will tell the story at the end. It's good if they know about the process of going through the EPD as well, so that they can tell the story. Involving a verifier at an early stage is also important because they can then be involved in making some of the decisions rather than leaving it to the review and then having to go back and do any changes. Lastly, using tools and background data that comply with the PCR and standards also helps to go smoothly through the review process. And when it's done, there is time to celebrate because it really is a true team effort. So this here is the OneSteel's team celebrating the EPDs. And that's a good opportunity for me to hand over to Rob. Rob Jonson is Customer and Market Relationship Manager at OneSteel's, and he has led the team through the process of developing 5 EPDs. Congratulations on those, Rob, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Barbara. Well, as people would note, we've titled this Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. Really the key thing is, first of all, identifying that there is a prize by pulling together environmental product declarations, or EPDs. As Barbara mentioned, I'll give you a bit of an overview about OneSteel's. We'll talk about the key drivers that we identified as a business and how we needed to keep focused on, once we've identified the drivers for developing the EPDs, keep the eye on the prize. That being, in fact, the development now of 5 environmental product declarations across our business units. We'll go through the key challenges and learnings and provide some feedback around some of the additional benefits that we weren't expecting to see that have come through to the business as well, and some feedback internally and externally since we've actually gone live with the EPDs. Apologies, there are a lot of slides in here. I will probably go through fairly quickly on them, but I will make them available through Barbara afterwards as well for those who would require them. Hopefully people, as Barbara has mentioned, will know of OneSteel's. Like many businesses involved in the construction sector, we're certainly enjoying a good, strong market at the moment, but it wasn't always the case, and we've been through some very difficult and challenging times as both an organisation and as an industry. So as Barbara has identified, one of the things we needed to do was to make sure that we continue to position ourselves as market leaders and thought leaders in the construction sector. In our case, we're a very large and complex manufacturer across multiple sites, and we'll look at that very shortly. We have electric arc furnaces and blast furnaces, or a blast furnace in Whyalla. We manufacture a wide range of products, and we are involved in both the mining, the manufacturing, and the distribution of steel products. This slide shows, to a degree, the complexity of some of the product flows that we have in the organisation. So at the top you can see that we take coal and iron ore effectively to melt them together in Whyalla. For those in New Zealand, you may not know that Whyalla is in South Australia, a couple of 100 kilometres north of Adelaide, so quite a remote location. We take those materials and we convert that into iron and then to steel through our combi caster. We move billet from Whyalla for use in our structural products and our rail, and also then transfer that's all manufactured in Whyalla, and then transfer it also to our other locations in Laverton and Sydney. The degree of complexity comes into then the mix of product flowing from the various locations to create a final product that will end up at one of our distribution outlets. Hopefully that makes sense. I realise it's quite complex and I'm trying to get through it reasonably quickly, but that there is a very complex flow of materials that need to be brought together. Hence, we need to engage a range of key practitioners across our business to make sure that we get the right level of output to develop the EPDs. This shows you in probably a more simplified fashion the flow of materials through to the final products. We come to the key issue here. Why is sustainability in construction important from a steel perspective? We're seeing increasingly high demands from the large contractors, constructors, project proponents for demonstration of sustainability outcomes. For us, 80% of our products go into construction one way or another, so it is fundamental to our ongoing success and development as an organisation. The EPDs of themselves, and as Barbara has highlighted, there's about 35 to 40 in Australasia at the moment, of which we have 5 and BlueScope have 3 or 4, so the steel industry has taken a strong leadership position there. It's about making sure that people are aware that we do take our environmental sustainability credentials very seriously, and we've been prepared to be transparent in our approach around the environmental footprint of our products in a standardised format verified by an external party. As I said before, it does position us as a key partner in the construction sector, and it also helps our customers, which is fundamental to the whole outcome. What do the EPDs do? They actually take a fair bit of noise out of some of the discussions that we have with some of the sustainability practitioners in the marketplace by providing the one source of the truth. That's perhaps oversimplifying, but it is one of the comments that we do get back, that the EPDs of themselves provide a high degree of confidence in what we're doing and what we're saying about what we do. They make it relatively easy to answer a range of questionnaires that may come from project proponents and from tenderers for projects. And for simplification, that means it also is the case that we are the only supplier in the Australian market of our products or our range of products with environmental product declarations. They go hand in glove with the BlueScope products, but they don't actually compete directly with them. It's important to note that when we started this journey, we identified that we were going to do EPDs only for our wholesale products or our manufactured products out of Whyalla and Laverton and Sydney. But as we were going through the process, we realised it wasn't a huge stretch to go an extra step and take it to an additional gate, that being to our retail outlets as well. So essentially we build up the data and pull it together to form the process for our manufactured products, and then look at the incremental impacts of taking the product from those manufacturing outlets to our retail positions. So it includes transport and some of the processing impacts as well. What are the key drivers? Well, many of you on the seminar or webinar will note that the Green Building Council of Australia is increasingly important in commercial construction in Australia, and the GBNZ is very similar in New Zealand. We've had very high recommendations from Romilly Madieu at the Green Building Council for the leadership position in respect of the EPD, so she and the GBCA recognise the importance of the EPDs. What's the context of that? 30% of Australia's CBD space is now Green Star certified. We're trying to get a handle on just how much of the new office space is Green Star certified, but it's rare for us to come across projects where the project proponents are not looking for a Green Star rating. It's very much part and parcel of what's expected now for many of the multi-story projects that are going up and around the Australasian CBDs. Further to that, we are finding increasingly in infrastructure projects, which comprise a very significant chunk of the work that we're doing around Australia and also in New Zealand, that the Infrastructure Sustainability Council's rating tool is getting a huge amount of traction on those projects, and people are looking for, as in the project proponents, are looking for how they can demonstrate their sustainability credentials in that very challenging market, and how they can best achieve the highest amount of points they can as relatively simply as they can. This slide gives you an idea of the types of projects around Australia that are seeking, that have registered for an IS rating. So it's registered by location. So as you can see, there's a very large number of key projects that are seeking an IS rating, in both Australia and New Zealand, and with a very high dollar value attributable to them. That's really the prize that's been identified for us. We note that the IS rating tool, for example, you can get up to 3 points for having environmental product declarations, depending on the value of products that go into those projects that are covered by EPDs. So it's not just about steel, it's about other material suppliers also having environmental product declarations as well. That's where collaboratively I think we can develop some very strong business cases. So we determined that we've identified that there's a prize there, that we therefore needed to go and embark upon the journey of developing the environmental product declarations, and doing so in a very challenging business environment. So we had to identify that we needed resources to be allocated to this project, prioritised against many other competing priorities. So we developed Project Sydney. Project Sydney being so named because of the Olympic Games held here in 2000, and they were seen at the time as being the most environmentally responsible games to be held, so an appropriate nomenclature, we thought. We kicked along and started to work through what are the things we're going to need to do. So it was very much like building a business case as you would for any item of capital equipment or any other significant project. We identified the key people within the matrix of management that we have in the organisation, and if you think back to the earlier slides, you'll have noted that we have people across corporate functions, people across manufacturing functions in Whyalla and Laverton and Sydney, and we needed to rely on people within those functions across the spectrum to be able to deliver the required outcomes here. So we pulled this together and said, this is what we're going to need to do. We're going to need to have a stream of work around data collection, around development, and then around implementation, and identified key people within that, and identified also that we needed a steering committee that provided the ongoing support for the project so that we could keep the priority, keep the eye on the prize throughout. We also identified very clearly, very early on, that we needed to get a very strong business partner to help us to develop the EPDs, and thinkstep were outstanding in that regard. We had weekly meetings between the project teams and determined where we were up to in the project, what we needed to do. We had great input from thinkstep all the way through about recommendations about what you should and shouldn't do and how you should best approach things. Sorry I'm rushing these, but I know that we're on a relatively short timeline. Project Sydney, as Barbara alluded to, is very much a team effort. You need to have your queen bees and you need to have your worker bees, and you need to make sure they're all understanding their particular roles and responsibilities and embarking upon those on a regular basis and doing the work that needs to be done. We clearly identified, as you'll see from this slide, the roles that are required, the description of what those roles encompassed, and then who were the resources that we were going to allocate to achieve that. As part of the business planning process, we worked on a breakdown structure on the work that was going to be required and a rough idea of the timing that it was going to take to pull together all the data. We did go a little bit over this time as we experienced some commercial internal difficulties that slowed us down a little bit, but this timeline would generally work pretty effectively. As Barbara said, a lot of it relates to business practices you may well be embarking upon at this point in time. It's pulling it together in perhaps a more formalised fashion and ensuring that you are able to report it in the appropriate way. Some quick tips: the key challenges and lessons. You need to be treating the development and launch of an EPD as a project. You can't just assume it's a business as usual approach and that people will just throw things in and it'll come out the right way. You've got to work hard at it, but you do get a really great result. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will take. Once you get it, you get a really great result. Again, there's a lot of words on this slide, so I won't labour the point, noting that we're getting closer towards 1:30. But you need to plan it. You do need to make resources available. You've got to keep your eye on that prize, that you are going to come up with an outcome that's going to deliver your customers and your business a really good benefit. So what are those flow-on benefits? It does help enormously in responding to project tender questionnaires. What we've found since we've launched the EPDs is it's encouraged a range of the project proponents to actually engage with us early in the piece. We've been asked by organisations such as ISCA and the GBCA to work with them and talk to project proponents about the EPDs and how they can provide benefit to the people who are working on those projects. That in turn encourages further conversations with those project proponents about the project requirements from a compliance perspective and other sustainability initiatives perspective that you may have as part of your overall offer. It reduces complexity, and it does provide that one source of the truth. It also, and there are these are things you don't necessarily think about when you're developing the EPDs. In our industry, and in many industries, I'm sure the businesses that are online may well have to be kept being certified to ISO 14001. There's a recent revision of that standard that requires an organisation to demonstrate they're consistent with a lifestyle perspective in terms of controls for design and development, requirements for procurement, etc. And an EPD goes a long way towards underpinning those requirements. In terms of stakeholder feedback, what it's done for us is broken down a number of barriers internally. It's enabled a much greater degree of cooperation across functions and across business units as people have understood the drivers and the need for this development of a transparent approach. It underpins a position that we have in the marketplace that says, you know, we are a manufacturer of quality products that comply with the relevant standards, plus we have a very strong governance and environmental sustainability perspective across that range of offer. It provides also a deeper understanding of our sustainability drivers across the sector, and it assists in conversations throughout the value chain. I could go on for a lot longer, but I just really wanted to thank you all for your time, and to thank our team. And as Barbara has shown earlier, there's a slide that has more people involved than this small group, but we were delighted to have Barbara and Katarina and the team from ThinkStep supporting us all the way through to deliver this really terrific outcome. As I say, it opens many more doors than we thought it would, and it provides a conversation starter across a business that's been going through some tough times. So Barbara, I'll throw it back to you if that's okay.
Thanks, Rob. That was really good insight and very practical tips for our audience. I'm sure that will be helpful for them. There are some questions here. One is, what do we do if we don't have all the data? And that's a question from Charles in Adelaide. Rob, maybe you could say, did you actually find all the data in-house, or was there anything where you did not have any of the data available?
It's a good question, Barbara. I'm not aware of anything that we didn't have in-house. I think we had all the data essentially covered through various other mechanisms. I'd need to verify that, but then perhaps you and I can take that offline and come back to Charles.
Yep. No, thank you. That would have been my impression from going through the project with you, and it's also confirmed by all the other projects that we do, that generally all the data is somewhere available in the organization, because there will always be a measure of how much has come in and how much have you produced. One other quick question from Adam in Auckland. Can it be done in-house, or do we always need a consultant? Well, I'm happy to say you do not always need a consultant. What you do need is a good tool, good databases, and in-house expertise. And how much it depends a bit on how much appetite you have for number crunching. We've worked with 1 or 2 companies where they just ask us the odd question, but they've done all of the work in-house otherwise. So it can be done in-house. We are unfortunately running out of time, but we will get back to you offline to answer all your questions. Even if you have questions after the webinar, feel free to contact us and we will get back to you. Thanks again, Rob, and thanks again for all of you out there for listening in today. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time in our next Straight from the Horse's Mouth webinar, Insights from Experts in 30 Minutes. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Rob.